On BBC Two, when you're on your way to work in the morning, have a think about this.
Not since the 1920s has Britain been so socially unequal.
Birth, not worth, has become more and more a key determinant of people's life chances. That trend is getting worse.
We've gone back to a society that's economically as divided as the upstairs, downstairs, post-World War I society. You're less likely to be able to change your position and then your children's position than your parents or your grandparents were.
As the gap between the rich and the rest has widened, so has the gap in opportunity for their children.
Part of the problem for working class young people is they talk about the professions being for posh people.
Which side of the line are you on? Are you struggling to break into the professions, or are you using your money and contacts to give your children a leg up?
Parents are actually trading internships amongst themselves now. You have my daughter for 2 weeks in your law firm, and I'll take your son for 2 weeks in my bank.
I'll be looking at the barriers that stop people rising up the economic ladder, the unseen advantages that the affluent pass on to their kids, and the basics like contacts and work experience that effectively rule some people in and most of us out. I'll be asking, who gets all the best jobs?
I come from working class roots, but I got a degree and became a BBC reporter. I thought this was a country where ability was the main qualification. Evidence suggests I was wrong. Success, it seems, is more about money and contacts, and the top jobs are still for a select few.
Only 7% of kids go to private schools, but 3 in 4 of our judges are privately educated. 1 in 2 of our senior civil servants, privately educated. 1 in 3 of our politicians, privately educated. 2 in 3 of members of the House of Lords, privately educated. And guess what? It's getting worse.
Britain's top jobs are certainly worth having.
The average hospital consultant earns about £130,000 a year. A senior barrister can expect to be on more than £500,000. The boss of one of Britain's top 200 companies would expect to take home more than £1 million a year. So the big earners are pulling away from the rest of us, and the more money they have, the more they're able to buy advantage for themselves and their children.
For a start, getting into a top job nowadays often means working for nothing.
I'm actually living in my parents' flat. Luckily for me, my parents are somewhat older, and my father's semi-retired, so they spend most of their time in the country, and I get the run of the flat, which is very nice.
Antonia's daily commute is a 3-mile trip from Chelsea to Soho in London. She works as an unpaid intern at Modus, a top PR company for the fashion industry. 70 people work here, up to 20 of them are interns. They usually work for 3 months and most are unpaid. Antonia has a master's degree in English, but to make it in fashion, you have to start at the bottom. 8 a.m. on a damp Wednesday morning. It's London Fashion Week and Modus are working on one of the biggest shows. And they're here in force, including half a dozen of their interns.
Okay guys, it's a really lovely sunny morning show.
The boss has arrived to oversee the operation. He believes internships offer newcomers a chance to get a foot in the door at one of the most competitive jobs in the business.
Within the fashion industry generally, the intern is a really vital resource. We need so many people.
And do the interns do proper work when they're here?
Absolutely, yeah, they really do. And what we really try and do is also get them to have a variety of experience as well.
If more than 15, maybe 20 of your 70 staff are working here for free, presumably that's quite key to the way you're profitable as well, is it?
What do you mean in the sense that are we more profitable because we've got free
because,
staff?
as you just said, they're doing proper jobs, and they're doing them for free.
Well, I mean, I think when I say they're doing proper jobs, I mean they're doing support jobs to the key team, but they are things that need doing. Yeah.
So does that help your company remain profitable?
I think that it's. Well, how would I answer that? I've never really thought of it like that.
The interns at Modus get experience across different departments, but they can expect to work hard.
I was up this morning at 5 o'clock. I came into work on the bus. I was here at about 7:15, putting out press releases, making sure that the seating was correct, making sure everyone knew what their jobs were for the day. And now it's my job to stand at the interior door and make sure that everyone knows where they're sitting. Really, this is an opportunity for me to make the contacts and to get in touch with the right people to find another job. If you're prepared to put in the hard work, it pays off eventually.
I'm wearing a little bit of Jaeger.
Celebrities and excitement. Life as an intern in PR can be a glamorous business. But working for free is a luxury not everyone can afford.
Rocks and stones, broken bowl.
Doesn't it depend on privilege and access to wealth and access to free accommodation? To be able to work for free for 3 months, most people can't do that.
But do you worry?
The problem is, one internship is seldom enough to secure a career. Of around 50 interns who work at Modus each year, only a handful get jobs there.
Internships now are the currency by which individuals can get into these prestigious jobs in the professions that are running our country. And the way that you get those is by being able to work unpaid, usually work in London, not have your travel costs reimbursed.
It's not just PR. My own profession, journalism, is getting harder to join. It used to be a job you could do straight from school. Now you mostly need a degree, and more journalism jobs than ever are in London. Girish.
If getting a job involves working for free for months in Britain's costliest city, it is clearly not open to all. But that is just one of the barriers to getting a top job. There are plenty, and they don't just affect a poor minority, they affect most of us.
Take medicine, a key job in any community. Medicine offers status and a good salary, but it's a world closed off to many of us. More than half of top doctors working in Britain went to private school. And research shows the next generation of doctors are typically growing up in the richest 20% of families. Sarah Pearce has spent 20 years fighting for fairer access.
The students largely come from independent schools, so there's been an increase in those who come from the state comprehensive sector, but it's still dominated by affluent people, very often with doctors in their family or among their friends.
So we just produce generation after generation of doctors from the same families?
Yes, that's right.
So medicine is the one profession where the balance of backgrounds ought to be easy to change, because everybody who goes through medical school will get a job as a doctor. The problem is getting into medical school.
But there are still some pretty basic barriers facing candidates from poorer backgrounds, like having enough cash for the 5 years of medical school and getting hands-on knowledge of a life in medicine.
Somewhere along the line, they're expected to get work experience, but it's much easier to get work experience for medicine if you know somebody, a doctor, who will supervise you. And many of them don't if they come from poor backgrounds. They're most unlikely to know a doctor in the hospital who will supervise them.
So that's how it works in practice?
That's how it works in practice. I've come across scores of students who have been in touch with me, and they have written perhaps to half a dozen hospitals trying to get work experience, and very often their letters haven't been answered.
If medicine has a long way to go, then it's only part of a pattern repeated across the traditional professions. Lawyers administer justice for us all, but the profession is hardly representative of the wider community. 7 in 10 judges and 6 in 10 barristers went to independent schools. This is the Young Barristers' annual gathering. Look around and you can see the bar has recruited more women and more ethnic minorities. But the social barriers remain.
I went to a very modest fee-paying school in Norfolk. I grew up in Norfolk. Then I went to Oxford to read English.
My dad was a barrister. I used to travel to court with him, and so became interested from that stage.
It's really funny. I seem to have weeks where I do just prosecution and weeks where I do just defence.
I went to school in Forest Gate, which is in Newham. I then went to Walthamstow to Sixth Form College and to Queen Mary University. In terms of how typical I am, whilst there are people with a background like mine, it's relatively unusual.
Money is one of the biggest barriers to widening access. It costs £15,000 to study for bar exams on top of a degree.
The higher those costs become, the higher that barrier is and the bigger the loans end up being. And that, in my opinion, is the single biggest thing which prevents people accessing the bar.
So it seems to get a top job, you increasingly need to be well off, have good contacts and be able to work for free. And that's not many of us.
We've now got a position where tomorrow's professional is growing up in a family that is richer on average than 7 in 10 families in our country. That means that some middle-class kids, as well as working-class kids, are being denied opportunities that should be open to them.
Those views on social mobility were formed by Milburn's childhood in the northeast.
Right, okay, so that's not too far. Well, this is where I grew up as a teenager at the end of the 60s, early 70s, so it's got lots of memories.
His journey from Newcastle Back Street to high political office was made during the golden age of social mobility.
In an area like this, there was, lots of poverty and all that stuff. What you didn't have, I don't think, is two separate worlds. You didn't have one society here, mainstream, and another society separated from the rest. And so there was a way of being able to get out. So for me, it never felt like you couldn't make your way in the world. It didn't mean working your way to the top, but you could become part of the mainstream.
So in those places there was a sense of a ladder. You might be on the bottom rung, but there was a ladder.
There was definitely a ladder.
Back then, O-levels were usually enough to get you into an office job on the bottom rung, and after that, anything was possible.
People left school at 15, 16 and got work. There were jobs in banks and so on. There was a whole range of things you could do. A small number of people went to university, but that's gone.
When Alan Milburn was a young man, Newcastle was an industrial powerhouse. Swan Hunter alone employed over 12,000 at shipyards. But in the 80s, Britain's manufacturing industries disintegrated.
Well, this is the home of shipbuilding in the heart of Newcastle. And I suppose when I was growing up as a kid, if you didn't have an education qualification, nonetheless, these sort of jobs provided you with an opportunity to get on the employment ladder.
So if you didn't go the academic route...
If you didn't go the academic route, you could get a job here.
Yeah.
Now look at it, it's all disappeared. I think the great thing about a place like Swan Hunters was you could start at the bottom, serve your apprenticeship, learn your trade, do your time, and move on up and stay there for life.
But if they're good at their job now, won't they rise through as they would have done here 20, 30 years ago?
Nowadays, the gap between the people who go down the so-called vocational route and the people who go down the qualification route is so vast. So you've got a segregated labour market, divided between the haves, who've got a qualification, and the have-nots.
Our party is the party of equality of opportunity.
The 80s saw an hourglass economy emerging, with unskilled workers trapped at the bottom, rich pickings at the top, and a collapsing ladder between the two.
Listen here. Now, that ain't working. That's the way you do it. Money for nothing and your chicks for free.
In five years' time, I'll have made a fortune, and that's what I want.
The number of people out of work has gone up sharply to a new record level. More than 3,340,000 people are on the dole.
It was a key moment, a fork in the road. Those with good jobs could provide more for their families. The rest were left behind. In the 80s, the gap between rich and poor widened by 60%. In the 80s, the gap between rich and poor widened by 60%.
That's the largest increase on record. And economic inequalities, large differences between the rich and the poor, work against social mobility. The social distance between those at the bottom and the top is far too great. It's like a chasm between people.
These 1950s babies were born into the golden age of social mobility. If you were born to an average family in 1958, you were more likely to get a job in the professions when you grew up than if you arrived in the world just 12 years later in 1970. That steady decline has continued to this day. But not everyone blames external forces. Some believe the economic divide has far less impact on where we end up than raw natural intelligence.
My basic argument on the basis of the evidence that I've looked at is that if you're bright and motivated, if you work hard, then you will be to a large extent successful, almost irrespective of what kind of family you came from.
In this country, the top jobs seem to be dominated by those people who've been to private school. Well, why is that?
Because of the ability distribution.
So people at
there
the
is an
bottom
ability distribution across the social classes.
There's less ability at the bottom of the social classes.
On average, you will find the ability level of the children being born into middle-class homes is higher, and that is what's driving the difference in occupational outcomes between the classes.
A lot of people are going to find that very hard to stomach,
Yeah,
and I'm one of them.
Yeah, they're going to find it absolutely obnoxious.
But it's this genetic element that somehow those people at the bottom of our society produced offspring that are not capable of rising to the top.
No,
I don't think that's the case.
Many people in the lower positions in the society produce children who are bright, and those children rise. But on average, you will find the ability level of the children being born into middle-class homes is higher, and that is what's driving the difference in mobility outcomes. On average, you will find the ability level of the children being born into middle-class homes is higher, and that ability level of the children being born into middle-class homes is higher. And
if the children of the rich are cleverer, then surely poor children will struggle to climb up the career ladder in every society. But not all countries are like this one. Amongst developed countries, we have one of the poorest levels of social mobility.
The latest research suggests that here in Britain, only about half of your earning power is down to your effort. The other half is down to the start you get in life. Now, in other countries where the gap between rich and poor is narrower, then things are different. There, about 20% of your income is down to your background, 80% is down to your effort.
Over 15 years of doing research with working class young people and families, there's not a dearth of aspiration. That's not the problem. It's having adequate resources and knowledge to put those aspirations into practice.
Carmarthenshire in South Wales. A reunion of Llandilo Grammar School's class of 61. All clever baby boomers who passed their 11 plus. Grammar schools had a massive impact on our nation's social makeup. In post-war Britain, they scooped up the brightest children and moved them on up.
The world was your oyster. Going to the grammar school, that was your pathway to achieving and to a successful career.
It wasn't just about facts and lessons. Grammar school children were encouraged to believe in themselves. These were the lucky ones, but there was a downside.
For every 11-year-old that got into grammar school, 3 others were rejected. Selection so young was pretty brutal. Now, the comprehensives that replaced them were intended to give all children the belief that they could flourish, but did they?
Alan Milburn's home territory, the North East, has the lowest proportion of graduates in Britain. He believes a lot of young people here set their sights low because they have no experience of people reaching the professions.
What ideally would you all like to do when you left school? Well, acting. What about the rest of you?
Same.
You all want to be actors?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think it's possible for somebody from round here, from a very ordinary type of background, do you think it's possible for somebody to get to the top?
Yeah.
You do? You're optimistic about it?
Cheryl Cole did.
Cheryl Cole? Yeah.
If you've got the ability, it doesn't matter where you live.
What's the hardest thing? What stands in the way of people?
It's the people thinking, well, because you're from that area, then you're not as good as someone from that area. So you just have to get past those stereotypes and then you can do anything.
Have you all had careers advice or not yet? Have you had? Yeah. And what was that like? Was it?
Yeah.
Was it not very good?
No.
So did anybody ever discuss with you going into like a professional job? You know, like becoming a journalist, medicine, the law, accountancy, architecture? Nobody ever discussed that with you?
You're asking a hell of a lot of children if you want to say, please have very high aspirations, because if the children have got any sense, they realise that their chances are incredibly low. And so, in effect, only very misguided children will think, I can become a pop star, I can become a top footballer, I can become a barrister.
Most parents do want the best for their kids, but some can provide more support than others.
There's an enormous amount of middle-class family labour and money and effort that goes into making up the middle-class child as artistic, musical, cultured, and all these accomplishments really count in their favour when they're applying for jobs and moving into the labour market.
Miranda.
The fees at King's Cathedral School are £12,000 a year. That's middle of the range for a private education.
What do you get for your money? What does a parent get for their money?
Where do I begin? I mean, you get a first-rate academic education with every chance of gaining top A-level grades and getting in most cases, to the university of your choice. But there's so much more. I mean, the extracurricular program here is vast, and definitely the kids have that shine of confidence about them when they leave. Shine of confidence about them when they leave. Have that shine of confidence about them when they leave the school. You can see that very, very clearly.
I very much hope that you had a good holiday. It was, of course, a very busy holidays for some. And at this point, I'd just like to mention the sporting tour of the Barbados. It seems to have gone extremely well, very much a job well done.
One of my daughters wants to be a marine biologist, so she goes down to Southampton. One wants to go into space, so she's going to aim for Cambridge.
Are you already thinking that this is a good school in terms of getting them into a profession? Is that one of the reasons that you...
Yeah, definitely. If you give them a good start, they will flourish and they will maybe, hopefully, find out what they want to do quicker than I did, really.
More than 200 miles north, in Darlington, Jordan Reed is about to start his new school, Longfield Secondary. His parents are proud he's a bright lad, but have firm views about how far his education should go.
I don't want them to be going out and having to get loans and things to get through university and be in quite a lot of debt at the end of it. It's not, to me, it's not a way to start a life once you do get your job. It's just something, a burden around your neck, really.
So to go to university, from your point of view, is a kind of gamble.
Yeah.
When you do get through it, what experience have you got? None. But to start working at a job, learning as a train, then get experience at the same time.
Have fun. See you, Mum.
Jordan's going to the local comprehensive.
Very smart. Are you looking forward to this then?
And then remember, you're recording all of your personal achievements.
A child at this state school will have spent on their education, on average, a quarter of what is spent on the education of a child at a private school. So when there is this big gap in resources, how can a young person leaving this school expect to compete in the job market with a kid from a private school down the road?
Of course, it would be wrong to suggest a bright child from a poor background can't enter the professions. But it can be a long and difficult journey. Georgina Jones is from Peckham in South London. She lives in a council flat with her family, and for 20 years shared a room not quite big enough for 2 beds with her sister. Georgina wanted a better life for herself and her mum, a school dinner lady. She decided to aim for a top professional job.
None of my mum's friends or family were university educated or were involved in any of the professions, so I think she was quite worried that that would be quite a big hurdle.
What are you having with your child?
I'm going to have chips and coleslaw.
Chips are bad for you. We even have separate oil.
She said it was a different world.
All parents want the best for their children, but working class parents often really lack the know-how of how to support their children in becoming socially mobile and moving into the professions. It's quite a difficult and painful process.
But Georgina did make it through. She got 3 A's and a B in her A-levels. Oxford turned her down, but she's now studying law at another of the top universities, Nottingham. Settling in there had its challenges.
There are a whole host of psychological barriers for less privileged students who worry whether they'll fit in, who feel that, well, everyone in that organisation is white and they seem to be posh and they seem to be wealthier than I am. Is it really the sort of place that would accept me?
I loved what I was studying, but it was quite hard socially. Most of my friends had been to private schools. Everybody's lives seemed so perfect and idyllic. All their parents had really nice jobs and everybody had done gap years. They'd travelled Australia, New Zealand, Fiji. The way people dressed at university was different. The way everybody spoke was different. They'd often say that I spoke a different language and thought I'd just listen to gangster music, and quickly earned me nicknames like Gangster Princess and Peckham Girl. Friends would ask me if I had guns or if my boyfriends had guns, which was quite funny because I was studying law, so.
Georgina's determination to succeed trapped her between 2 worlds and 2 groups of friends.
When I'd come home, none of my friends were at university, so it was quite hard to fit back in. The guys would call me uni girl when I came home, and sometimes they would respond to me as if I suddenly thought that I was more important, whereas I didn't actually have that opinion at all. I was just doing what I wanted to do.
But Georgina is on track for the life she wants, a career in commercial law.
We have a phrase, helicopter parent. It's a parent who hovers figuratively over their son or daughter, intervening almost like a personal SWAT team whenever things get difficult. And they're incredibly effective. We defined different types of helicopter parent. One was the banker, someone who will pay for their son or daughter to go to the university and expect a rate of return. The other I call the agent, and that's someone who would negotiate on behalf of their client, who happens to be their son or daughter.
A place at Liverpool is highly prized. It's one of the so-called Russell Group of 20 leading British universities, the ones most likely to be favoured by employers.
We know that many of the big companies, the big recruiters, have increasingly small lists of universities from whom they pick potential employees.
Is that a myth, or is that an actual fact, that people who are recruiting for the professions look at these top universities?
There are some signs that in the current recession, that recruiters are actually shortening their university lists. So, for this particular generation coming out of university now, it's an even bigger issue.
Wolverhampton University is proud of its local roots and its record for attracting low-income students who might not normally consider higher education. And tonight, more than 200 of them are getting their degrees. This is a successful place, 30% oversubscribed and about halfway up the league table of Britain's 192 universities. To get here, a lot of these graduates probably had to overcome greater odds than their wealthier counterparts.
This is a fantastic day for these young people, a successful end to 16 years of state education. The problem is degrees are not what they were. More and more students are going through ceremonies like this. And that means the top professions will look to the top universities. And Wolverhampton isn't one of them.
Baharak's work experience at Barclays Bank should prove useful.
This week has given me kind of an edge, because nowadays everyone's getting an A. If you got an A, so what? Everyone's got an A. What makes you different? This one.
But with university fees set to rocket to £9,000 a year in 2012 and no wealthy parents to help her, Baharak faces a mountain of debt when she starts her career.
I liked it.
Tonia's dedication hasn't been rewarded with paid work in the PR industry. Now she's looking for a job in publishing instead. Georgina shows if you have ability and you're determined, you can make it, whatever your background. She'll finish university in the summer and has already been offered a job starting at £35,000 a year at a top law firm in the city. Georgina and Baharak are on a path to professional success, but unequal opportunities stop too many from fulfilling their potential, and that harms all of us. Research shows fairer countries prosper, so we all lose if the top talent gets locked out of the top jobs. That's the story of the last 30 years. People are trying to change things. How long, though, before we get a different answer to the question, who gets all the best jobs?